Any tiny bit of moss has the ability to develop into a new plant with a stem, leaves, and rhizoid. Moss needs consistent moisture to transform from a spore to a small plant. For quicker coverage, mosses can be propagated in a variety of ways. It's a Sprouted Seeds YouTube channel. Subscribe and let's get started. Finding moss to propagate. Remember that tiny pieces of moss that are recovered from cracks in a sidewalk, or tiny bits that are growing in a lawn or beside a foundation, can be utilized to spread cultivated moss over larger areas. Method 1. Add a cup of buttermilk or yogurt or beer and water to a blender along with a handful of moss. Mix the contents until they form a slurry. The first moss slurry recipes were not always successful. According to newer recipes, combine half cup of dried and shredded moss with half teaspoon of water storing polyacrylamide crystals. Then blend with 2 to 3 cups of liquid. In addition to providing the acidic environment and some nutrients that most mosses require, the solution of beer or highly diluted dairy helps the moss fragments stick to a surface, such as a clay pot or brick wall. To fill in the voids left by the transplanted moss pieces, pour or paint this slurry over the rocks. The spores in the slurry will form moss as long as you keep the area moist to allow it to grow. Use only distilled water or rainwater until new growth is established. Method 2. The moss mat propagation method. The moss mat is another way to grow moss from fragments. This technique suggests using synthetic felt sheets, which have a neutral acidity and can retain moisture, to grow mosses. The fragments receive moisture from felt, which also enables their thread-like rhizoids to adhere to the thick fabric. To help retain moisture and stop soil beneath the mat from wicking moisture away from the moss, place a sheet of plastic underneath the felt. Weeds are also discouraged by the plastic. Above the felt, an airy layer of tulle shields the moss from drying winds, keeps anything from suffocating it, and shields it from disturbance by birds or other animals. Gather the moss into tiny clusters. Moss has plenty of space to grow and spread out around each little clump because it grows fastest along clump edges. Before putting the moss on the mat to grow, remove any small pieces of grass that might be entangled in the fragments. The mats can be divided into smaller pieces once the moss starts to grow and spread on the felt. Care. Irrigate with slightly acidic water to help establish moss on potting soil in a container. Surprisingly, a small amount of beer added to the water could actually speed up the establishment of moss. Depending on the style of brew, beer can have an acidity from 4 to 6. Tea has an even higher acidity and can be applied similarly to reduce the acidity of soil. After brewing an old tea bag in a gallon of hot, distilled water until it turns pale brown, use the resulting liquid to hydrate the moss in the container. Because moss needs adequate air circulation, growing moss indoors is challenging. Plants that aren't exposed to wind and natural light are susceptible to fungal and mold growth. If moss is not grown under grow lights and is not frequently open to allow in fresh air, a terrarium may be fatal to it. For the same reason, indoor moss plants should be transferred every few days outside into the shade. Locally native moss is not harmed by cold, snow, or ice. Because snow melts gradually and allows light to reach the ground, moss will grow and flourish there. Make sure to mist newly established moss plantings often with either distilled water or rainwater. Watering with tap water may kill the moss by raising the acidity of the planting, or by adding harmful chemicals to the soil. In addition to shielding the soil, moss doesn't require mowing or fertilizer to maintain its beauty year after year. This plant is fascinating to have in your garden.